Hi, everyone, and welcome. Oops. And as soon as I started the broadcast, all of a sudden things shifted. Pardon me to come back here. Had a couple of minor glitches this morning, and that, of course, means it's live demo day because, what else do you expect but glitches? I'm Jake Freevold. I'm the VP of Product Marketing here at Fulcrum, and today we're going to talk about integration techniques inside Fulcrum. And to do so, I'd like to, first of all, start with a goal to talk about what we're trying to accomplish. I don't necessarily expect you to walk away knowing how to do everything I'm going to talk about, but I would like to make sure that you know that it's there and some of the things that it's useful for. Also, we are going to walk through some specific methods, including, and I'll show you this in a second, including, integrating with Slack, et cetera, et cetera. So you will be able to hopefully know where some of the documentation is and get an idea of what's possible and what methods you might use to do which things. To get that off the ground, to achieve the entire goal, though, I'd like to start off just by talking about why integration is so important to Fulcrum and where it fits within our goals for our product as a platform. Give you an overview of the integration techniques are before we actually start walking into any of them and doing any of them, and then we'll get to the demo. And there will be Q&A at the end. Like I said, I'm a product marketing guy, so if you ask me anything really hard, the answer might be something along the lines of, let's talk to professional services, but I'll answer what I can. And there is a survey, by the way, at the end of all this. So when you are all done watching and you start to log off, please do respond to that survey. We take them very seriously. So that is the current situation for our agenda today. There are a couple of items for your use in the webinar kit, if you will, here on screen. One of them is just an item that shows what Fulcrum is all about, and that is the left-hand data sheet that you see here. The other one, I figured that because so many of us are going to be interested in integration techniques and usage, it might be worth having something that you can hand off to your IT professionals to talk about the security that we use in order to make sure that there are no roadblocks for you getting started with some of the integration techniques. So that's what those security protocols are. If you look on the right-hand side, there you go, of the that second data sheet where it says Fulcrum for IT professionals. On the right-hand side of that, it talks about some of the security protocols that are in place, what we run on AWS, et cetera, et cetera. So those are items you can find within the GoToWebinar interface. So let's talk briefly about where integration fits into Fulcrum's goals. And Fulcrum really aligns or organizes around three major principles. The first one is being able to standardize your data collection activities. So on a single platform, we need to be able to capture data in a wide variety of different use cases. The vast majority of them are field-oriented specifically, and we want to make sure that all of those use cases are supported by Fulcrum to the greatest extent possible. One of the things that indicates for us is that you also need to be able to customize the data collection processes that you're engaged in. If you're doing asset management data collection, then it needs to be able to be customized to support Maximo or whatever you might have on the back end that actually is designed to manage which is designed to do asset management. Like that, if that's your asset management application, then you need to be able to tweak everything you're doing from data collection to integration to be able to accommodate what Maximo needs from your data collection processes, as well as anything else that you might need to do just that's directly related to the field. And therefore, anything that we're doing really is required to have some kinds of integration capabilities with the enterprise. But it's not just about connecting with the Maximos and SAPs and whatever's of the world. There's a lot of data that should be coming into Fulcrum and going out of Fulcrum. So for example, when we're trying to get enterprise data into Fulcrum in order to enhance fieldwork, it might be Esri data about the pole locations that you're doing vegetation management for, or it might be Maximo data to tell you what you think you already know about the assets that you've got, or maybe the spreadsheet that you've got lying around the house, or the sensors or drones that you're using within your data collection processes. Now, all of that information needs to be brought into Fulcrum so that the person whose feet are on the ground are able to use that data most effectively. Once they've got that data, they're then able to execute some kind of a process, and that could be anything from an inspection to vegetation management to a disaster response scenario. All that information has to come to bear for that person at the right time. Then once that information is collected, and I should just pause and note that when I say information being collected, I think about inspections a lot. So very often the process is specifically a data gathering process. But in this case of something like vegetation management, you're slinging a chainsaw. You're not thinking of your job as data collection, but the process of showing that you have complied with your requirements or that you have done the process correctly is a data collection process. So in some cases you're doing process management, but the data collection is the aspect of managing that process to fruition and making sure that you're compliant with it. Anyway, getting all of that information out of your field teams and back into the enterprise can help your enterprise do things like perform different kinds of analysis, give you a strong database from which you can do things like train AI-based systems. It provides the operations capabilities to the field while giving a lot of the analytical capabilities to the rest of the enterprise that can then leverage that data to enhance the enterprise and see where, for example, things might need to take place more frequently, because some kind of maintenance might need to take place more frequently, or where certain types of techniques of doing maintenance are an improvement over others. Whatever that kind of analysis is, you need that good, solid, high quality data in order to be able to continue to push that information and push that analysis and get the analysis done. So it's about getting the information into Fulcrum to enhance the field work, executing the field work, and then pushing that data out of Fulcrum back to the enterprise to do what needs to be done in the enterprise. So integration is a really critical aspect of what we do. It's really important to Fulcrum. It's important to almost every single client that I've spoken to personally. Fulcrum is not just a system of record. It is for field data. It's also a system of record of field data that then has to share that field data with other places. And I think this is particularly important with our field orientation, because when you look at the process of supporting the field, they're frequently dealing with a lot of different kinds of what I like to call field tech, stuff that's owned by the field, maintained by the field, and it's built for the field. The people who manage IBM Maximo might not really get the field as well as the people who are actually doing the work there. So they have to draw from other kinds of field tech that they've got. Maybe it's the drone imagery that tells them where they believe that there is a broken insulator on a pole. They need to pull information from those enterprise systems because the poles that they're working with are tracked in Esri, and the equipment that they're using for those poles, like the transformers that are on them or what have you, are in Maximo. So bringing all of that information together is really important, and then bringing their own resources to bear is critically important as well. So that, if you will, the left-hand side of the diagram is, to me, all about the data integration. How do I get the data together? And then once we've got that kind of capability for the field technician or field operator, that person is able to execute more effectively and may be able to use field tech assets, including things like sensors. I'm going to give you one example of that later on. I'm going to show you a demonstration of getting live weather for that field operator, just as an example of the kind of thing that you can do. But there's the ideas are literally limitless. And then finally, if you're trying to justify to corporate that you need to be able to get better gear, or you need to be able to buy Fulcrum, or you need to be able to do something that's going to truly improve corporate, then you need to be able to demonstrate that. You need to be able to show that you're going to have a maximized return on investment. And that means being able to get higher quality data, push that data to more places, because data gets increases in value as it gets shared by more people and used for more things. So being able to really share that data more effectively is going to improve your return on investment for those office-based enterprise systems and for your field data. So I just like to think about Fulcrum. If data is the lifeblood of the organization, then Fulcrum is the heart of the field. We don't handle every single possible kind of data, but we are definitely very focused on field-oriented data requirements and how to make sure it's in the right people's hands at the right time. All right, with all of that in mind, I'd like to actually start to get to the heart of the techniques that we'll be talking about. And to do that, I'm going to start off with, these are honestly pretty ugly diagrams, but I don't know a better way to express it right now. So I'm going to start with a simple diagram that shows the native integration capabilities that we have in Fulcrum. So these are the 8 that I'd like to talk about at least a little bit. And the challenging thing for many people is figuring out which type of integration you want to use when you're tasked with solving a specific problem. So what I like to do is break these 8 down in a couple of different ways. Look at them, if you will, through a couple of different dimensions. So for example, very often we want to do everything with as little code as possible and get the job done just by clicking and dragging or whatever it is that you need to do. Unless, of course, you're a coder, in which case you want to make sure that you've got the ability to do literally anything based on writing some code that's going to manage some very tricky scenarios. So when we're talking about code-based solutions, we're typically talking about our APIs and our data events. You'll see that code-based doesn't necessarily mean to be complex code. I'm going to show you a little snippet of JavaScript. That's that live weather being added to an app that I'll show you in a little bit. But it does mean that you're writing, JavaScript or something in order to be able to perform the integration that you want to perform. The lighter blue are all non-code oriented ways of getting the data you need, whether it's downloading the data directly from Fulcrum, so you end up with a spreadsheet or a GeoJSON file or something along those lines, or whether it's sending an email live in real time. I'll demonstrate that later too, so I can easily email Fulcrum information to someone, or webhooks, which are kind of, if anything, the defining boundary for me between code-free and code-based. Well, the webhook that I'm going to show you just requires a particular kind of format of data, and once you've got that format of data down, then systems know how to handle that format of data. So I'll show you that in a little bit. So the light blue tends to be more code-free. The darker blue one tends to be code-based. The other thing that I like to orient around is, am I trying to integrate with systems, or am I trying to share information with people? And so as you can see, those in the kind of northwest corner of the diagram are more about people, and the ones in the southeast, if you will, are mostly about systems. The shared views do give you the opportunity to share things with people as well, just because people frequently want something like a spreadsheet and they understand how to do that, and shared views will give you that for them as well. So yeah, we can orient around whether we're sharing with people or with systems when we're talking about integration as well. Next, I want to talk about push versus pull. Are we pushing data from Fulcrum? If we are, then we're doing things like using that email to push information just after a record gets created to be sent out to someone so that they can see what that record holds. Or if I'm trying to push it out to a system, then that webhook is doing the same kind of thing. Data events, as you'll see, can be used in a similar way, although they can really be either one. The darker blue, downloading information, map layers, things like that, shared views. There I've got someone who's trying to get information from Fulcrum at a certain time. It needs to be up to date at that time. So it's a pull orientation toward those kinds of integrations. And then finally, I don't have anything particularly highlighted here. There are third-party tools out there like Zapier, which enable you to take a what they call a trigger, and which is the same word we use in our workflows, so it's pretty familiar. You use a trigger, and that trigger is something like record is created, and then once that record is created, the data comes from the record that was just created and is able to be manipulated by Zapier to a form that is available for another third-party application. So for example, there are some capabilities there with Procore, and I don't know the details there, so I won't go into anything significant there. But if you have, if you have Zapier, or you're interested, you're okay with using a third-party tool, then it may be that using the data from a Fulcrum record could be pushing, the data that is from a Fulcrum record could be pushed into another application to do other kinds of updates. So that's the broad overview of the 8 different kinds of integrations that we're going to do today. And well, we won't look at all of them today, but we'll look at many of them today. And again, if you have questions about any of these specifically, I encourage you to put them into the Q&A section of the interface so that we can take a look at them at the end. If I don't know the answer, I'll say so, but if I do know an answer, I'll be able to give you something that's that'll help you along your way. So with that, I'd like to start performing demonstrations of some of these techniques. There are several that I'm going to go through, ranging from the very simple. Well, to be honest, everything's reasonably simple, but from the very simple to some things that are a little bit more sophisticated and interesting. And if even if you don't see something that sparks your interest today, as far as doing that specific thing, it'll probably at least give you ideas about what you can do. And once you know what's possible, that means that you can do quite a lot more. Here's my basic workflow for today. Simple import, export, download. We'll do some pulling from Fulcrum by making records accessible via a web service, including Esri integration as a web service. I think that's a really intriguing capability that is so easy to do that it sometimes gets overlooked. Then how do I not pull to Fulcrum, but if I'm using Fulcrum, how do I pull information into Fulcrum? That I'm going to show that with a feature service layer from ArcGIS in Fulcrum, a public one in that case. Then again, pushing data from Fulcrum, I'm going to send information to Slack. I'm going to send information via email. And then finally, I'm going to use data events to populate a form field with live weather. So hope that's all interesting to all of you. I am going to come out of presentation mode and start by coming into an application that we can use to start to see this. Now, this is a really trivially simple application for good reason, and it is, but it's a typical application that we see in lots of different organizations. That is basically an observation app. So I'm going to click over and just see what the app fields look like for a moment. You can see there's a description, a risk level, some photos, and this calculated field that uses some GIS wizardry behind the scenes to calculate the square meters of the geometry that I've got with the in that record. So the first thing I want to do is I want to be able to point out. Everything runs a little slower when we're live on a webcast. I think Zoom or GoToWebinar is kind of the same, so we're seeing a little bit of sluggishness here. I've only got a couple of records in this one at the moment. I'll be adding a couple more as we go along in our demo today. You can see, for example, here there's a low risk observation where there's a brush pile that needs to be removed, and up here I said it's an unsafe pole, but I gave it a geometry, a polygon geometry instead anyway. I just want to be able to show that there are ways to pull data in here. So if you're dealing with converting over from another application, for example, and you want to be able to pull in observations that have previously been made, or if you want to do things with in the vegetation management item that I've done here, for example, you can pull in a number of polls, that sort of thing. You can just create a new import here, choose the app that you want to deal with. I've got a lot of different junk applications here, as you can see, but I might want to use my observations app. You can say whether you're going to create new records or update existing records. You browse for your file, and then you can pull in the record that you want to pull in. In this case, these are zip files that contain shape files that were exported from Fulcrum previously. So shape files have some limitations. For example, their field names are only 10 characters long, so you have to do a little bit of mapping to get that done. But if you just select your file, do the import from a comma selected separated values file or a shape file or something along those lines, you do your mapping in the next step and be done with it from there. Similarly, you can do exports that would come from a particular application, and you can have this be, again, whatever kind of application you want it to be. I personally, you could choose obviously the one that's here as well. If I choose my vegetation management app, then you can see that I can select the type of, I would be able to pull out the poles or lines that I have available within there, and it'll bring the geometry along with it. In this case, I've got 24,000 records. And when you start to pull that information out, it would just to ask you that you want to do all of that export, which I'm not going to do right now, but that's really all there is to doing an export from Fulcrum. Now, what I find more useful sometimes if I'm not doing these big exports, and I'm really talking about sharing data, is I go into the data itself, the application itself, and view the records that I'm interested in. Instead of going to that observation app, I am going to move to the vegetation management app. And inside this, because we do have a pretty rich data environment, you can see quite a number of things, but I might not want to see everything that's in there. So I might want to say, oh, I only want those items that have a revisit needed. I've only got 2 in this case, but you can see how in a case where you've got 24,000 polls. This might be, 5,000 polls that need to be done. You can download that data here, and it's limited to the things that I'm looking at, right? To the data set that I have selected here. So I actually don't want the map on in this case. I'm going to drop the map, and I happen to know that there's still only 2 records in there, but I'm going to drop the map, and I can download that data. And based on the record format that I want here, again, shape files or whatever it may be, record links. This is really important. So if you're going through a process where you have different apps working together to fulfill a task, in this case, I actually have in the vegetation management app, that observation app. I can create an observation from within my vegetation management workflow, which is really cool. What that means is that I've got an observation app that anybody can use, can be inserted into any workflow, but it's a standard observation app. So we do that with linked records in this case. Well, if I'm trying to do something where I want to potentially create a relational database that contains information about the 2 different kinds of linked records together, then I probably want that record ID of the record link, and I'll download the record link itself later on. And then I can choose the media how I want to do the media fields and which ones I want to include. So that's another way to download the specific subset of the data that you want as a pull at a point in time to get all of the data that's relevant to you in the format that you need. There is something else that's kind of cool though, and I want to go to do something else. I'm going to include all of my records here now, and yeah, you can see that we've been playing with the demo data. So I got to go back to our Vermont where I was. So here is the the data that I'm interested in looking at. What if I take a look at this information and I say I want only, let's say, the poll information that's in this section of the map that I'm looking at. So I share to make sure I've got everything that I can see in the map. And inside the poll, I say, okay, I want to select specific values. Pardon me, in the asset type, I want to select specific values. I'm going to select only the polls. Now I'm reducing the amount of data that I'm seeing. And I could, of course, have different types of objectives here as well. I could include, who the owner is. I could select the specific owners that I want. If I want the poll heights, then I could choose to filter by a condition where the poll height is greater than 50 feet, let's say, or greater than 35 feet, let's say. I could create exactly the data that I want. And then I can share that data with something that's called a shared view. So I want to save the view here. You see now that I'm filtered down to about 4,000 records. In this case, the view that I want to create is polls in Vermont, webinar demo. And rather than have a private view, which would just make it easier for me to find this information again myself, I can get a shared view. And the shared view enables me to have URLs that will give me the kind of data that I'm looking for. So for example, if I take this comma separated values version and I create a new window, then you can see that I can just immediately snag all of the data that's related to the information that I have in that set of data. One very cool thing that people don't seem to understand sometimes is this feature service layer is also something that's accessible or usable within ArcGIS. But if you're really just trying to look at some of your data and do some analysis in ArcGIS, the simplest way to get it in there is to click this button. And when you do, I don't know why it always takes me to Romania first, but it does. It might be my VPN. When you do, it'll bring you to the ArcGIS view of that Fulcrum data, where it is consuming that Fulcrum data as a feature service layer. Now, you'll notice when I clicked that, I wasn't signed in. So I'm going to sign in. And once it's inside ArcGIS in that way, I suddenly have a lot more things that I can do. So for example, I can say, well, I'm in Vermont. Let me zoom in a little bit here. I'm in this section of Vermont, but I really want to be able to see more of what's going on in Vermont. So I want to be able to add a layer from a URL, for example. Okay, well, what layer? I went out and found some Vermont town boundaries. This is a public feature service. Obviously, you could use your own private feature services as you saw fit. I'm going to add that to the map. And now not only am I looking at the polls that were in that Fulcrum data set, but also adding additional information and context to people so they can do analysis within ArcGIS to do that. So very simple way of getting the information from Fulcrum in real time. As you pan, zoom, refresh, whatever it may be, you'll continue to get the freshest and most up-to-date information from Fulcrum using that feature service layer that really just took us one click to get to. Now, what about going the other way around? You might consider, well, I really want this map information. I want these town boundaries. I want them within, I'm going to confirm that layer. I want to put that into this. I want to be able to see all of those town boundaries while I'm observing my own Fulcrum data. Well, one way to do that is to go to your map layers, and this is for public data. And I'm going to create a new map layer. Sorry about the delay. We'll see if we can edit this out in post-production. Who knows? We're going to select an ArcGIS feature service layer as our feature type. This is going to be Towns of Vermont. And the public service that I want to use is the same one that was provided by the state of Vermont. And I'm just going to start by saying update preview. I always like to do that in here. I like to go in and see where exactly I might see what I'm looking for here. And there you go. So you can actually see the map coming up, the boundaries coming up live. They weren't there before. You can see the boundaries coming up. So I'm going to create that layer. And now anytime that I want to use that layer, it's just here on the list of all of the available map layers that can be used by anybody within your organization who has need for it. So here you go, Towns of Vermont, ArcGIS feature service layer. All right. Now, with having done all that, what I would like to do is I'd like to go back to my apps and create a webhook for Slack. And that webhook is going to take the any observation that I make and put it into Slack for as a message. And I'll show you what whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I'll show you what I want to do. I'm going to go over to the dashboard because that's where the workflows are. You'll see that I've got one here that's already built, post high-risk observations to Fulcrum Marketing Workspace in Slack. That's there so I can show you some things that are a little too complicated to go into just live during the demo, and also so I don't mess it up during the demo. I'm going to create a new workflow that contains, that will post low-risk observations. So don't be surprised. I'm doing something that you would normally never do, which is post low-risk observations to a Slack channel, but I'll do that as the example for doing what, for accomplishing the task. So if you were to go out to Slack and you did some research, you'd find things that you'd about workflows within Slack. So this is from one of their help articles. You can create a workflow that starts with a webhook and it tells you the things that you need to think about and the things that you need to do. You need a certain amount of permission. Once you've got that permission, a lot of the rest of the steps are relatively straightforward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to toggle over to Slack now. And I'm in a special channel called Demo Slack Messages. You can see the latest one was sent out here at 12:03 Eastern time, so that was about 2.5 hours ago. And it was a low-risk observation. You didn't see that workflow in Fulcrum anymore because I've deleted it. You can also see the high-risk observations from Fulcrum, which were from previous runs of that other workflow. Okay, nice. How do I actually create a workflow that's going to give me a post of this type? In Slack, you want to go to Workflow Builder. Workflow Builder will bring you to a screen where you can see existing workflows and you can create your own. We're going to create a new workflow and we're going to create it from a webhook. Now, the thing that Slack needs to get from us is the set of data that it's going to use to publish its message. So I'm going to set up some variables here, and the data types are almost always text unless you want to do something special with like a user email or something like that. I'm not going to do that in this case. I'm going to keep it really simple. So the thing that I want to be able to push into Slack is some kind of an observation. So in my observation, I showed you those screens earlier. There was an observation description, and there was a risk level associated with that observation description. In addition, we know that within Fulcrum, we automatically collect things like the name of the person who did the observation, the time at which it was made or created the record, I guess I should say in this case, an observation record. So the person who did it, their email address, the time it was done, and stuff like that. So keeping things really simple here, I'm going to say I want an observer. Done. I want the observation. I want the observation time, and I want the observation risk. So those are the items that I'm going to use within Slack. Notice it sets up my data structure here for me. So this is really helpful to me personally, because as a marketing guy, I don't really understand JSON very well, and I just want to know what I got to do here. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to put it for the next moment into, whoops, I'll show you that in a minute too. I'm going to put that in here so that I can fill in the blanks in a couple of minutes. Notice there's this web request URL. We're going to need that. I'm not sure why it forces me to continue and shut this window first in order to get that done, but it does. I'll come back to that in a second and snag that web request URL and also park that over here in my text file. So now what do I want to do with the data that I get from that webhook? I want to send a message. In this case, I want to send a message to a specific channel. It'll ask me which channel. We saw before that it was demo Slack messages. And I'm going to add the message. I'm going to keep this one really simple, and then I'll show you some of the fancy schmancy stuff you can do with the one that I already built. So it's the whole Julia Childs here I'm going to put in the oven, and then later I'm going to take something else out. Okay, so I want to put in that the observer posted the following observation at, and then I want to take the time, and then insert the variable of the observation itself, and risk is whatever the risk is. Now, I'm going to control this in the workflow so that it could be only high or only medium, or medium and high, or whatever. If it's going to be more than one thing, then I want to be able to display what that risk looks like. So that's why I just put that in there. It's not technically necessary for this specific minor use case I'm dealing with, but that's what it is. I'm going to save that. And this is what it's going to actually look like in Slack when we run this thing. And now I'm going to publish that workflow. Oh, and it is a demo of data from Fulcrum. And next, anybody can find it, anybody can use it, I'm going to publish it. Now, if all it went well, Slack is ready for a message from Fulcrum at any time. Now let's go build out that message in Fulcrum and see what it takes to make this Slack message happen. And to do that, I'm going to go back to my app, and I'm going to create a new workflow. And the name of the workflow is going to be, again, low risk observation post to Slack. And I just want to do a couple of really simple things. I'm going to make it so only when the record's created, not when it's updated or anything like that. I want to make sure I'm looking at the risk level, and when the risk level is equal to low, and only then do I want this to execute. And what do I want it to do? I want it to webhook. I'm going to come back and show you email and SMS just because it's worth knowing how easy it is to do those things. But I'm going to do webhook for right now. Now, you'll notice the method is post and the URL is whatever this thing is. What is that? Well, that is, if I can go back to my editor, is this URL. So I plug that in here. I don't do anything with basic authorization or other query parameters and headers. I like to say I don't know anything hard, so I don't do anything hard. That's kind of where I'm at with that. If you know that stuff better than me, awesome. I'm going to put in my payload here. That includes observer, and the observer is going to be replaced by the created by name, right? This is some metadata that Fulcrum is automatically capturing. I'm going to pull in that observation, which is called description in the app. Notice it doesn't matter what they are as long as you get the right field in the right place. It doesn't really matter how you get it there. And the observation time is going to be the created at field. And then finally, I want the observation risk, which is going to be the risk level. I'm done setting up my webhook. I enable the workflow. I save and exit. All right, now if all goes well, that's my low risk observation post to Slack. If all goes well, I can flip you over to the observation app, which is, whoops, that is not what I wanted, which is, I had location services on before, so we should have location services on again, but I'm just going to double check. And yep, location service is on. So I'm going to now create a new low risk observation that I want to post to Slack. So here we go. I'm going to put in the description live from the webinar. And the risk level is going to be low. And I could take a photo, but I'm not going to. I'm going to locate it, which is going to be at my house. So I'm going to just set, make my point there. And I'm done. I'm going to save that. Now, what we should expect to see, you're not going to see an alert come up because I've set up my alerts on Slack to off for the sake of this webinar, but I should be able to come back here to the Slack demo Slack messages, and already I've got this thing that says Jake Freewald posted the following observation live from the webinar, risk is low. Excellent. So you can see that for really simple messages, this is really simple. It's a really easy way to get messages into a third-party application. Most of your more modern apps, your SaaS-based apps, many different types of apps are using webhooks these days. If you don't have the ability to use a webhook, then you might need to use some kind of code and access their API in some other way, but this is a really standard way of doing it. I do want to come back to Slack just a little bit and show you how I got the much better looking, sorry, I didn't mean to go there. I meant to go to Workflow Builder. I wanted to show you how we got the much better looking high risk observation apps, because that to me is really worth understanding. First of all, if you look at what I've done here, the basic content is roughly the same, but you see this where it says located at, and then there's this long inputs thing. This is a little bit of a hack within Slack, but it's worth knowing about. You can't, if you do a complete copy of all of that text within Slack, you'll see Slack's ugly underbelly, but it's worth understanding Slack's ugly underbelly a little bit, because where I say high risk observation and it says description, it's actually got these double brackets that are used for any other kind of, that are used to indicate what record or what fields are out there. So for example, when I created link to Fulcrum record, it wouldn't let me create a link like that. You see how it's got up here, the ability to create a link? I wanted to be able to create the link with the field name, and I couldn't do it with the field name. So instead I had to copy and paste the data over and then copy out the handlebar bracket style of reference, and then use that as my link. So that's what I put into the HTTPS here. So when you do the edit, for example, you need to actually have that Fulcrum record. Here's the link that it goes to, is this HTTPS with the Fulcrum record. Having said that, knowing that you can do that is really hugely important, I think, because it allows you to do things like take your messages from your Fulcrum records and be able to click directly on that link and take you directly into the specific record that you want to view. So somebody who's getting an alert can be able to click on that record and have that record pop up in the web app and be able to show exactly what it is that this observation or whatever that data is looking at. So, and by the way, I'm not going to do that on these ones because I believe these records are deleted. So it's going to show me, 404. That I thought better about it. I would have had a good one up there and then click that, and you would have seen the Fulcrum record, but a little late now. So with all that in mind, I'm going to go then to one last workflow, just because I said I would do it. I want to show you that how easy it is to create an email high risk observation, observation. And this way I'm going to say whenever the record's created again, when it was a high risk equals high. And now I'm going to choose email. Same thing with SMS. It's really super simple. If you have a PDF report, you can include that PDF report here. You can hard code things in here, or you can insert values. So you want this to go to the person that was created by, that's fine. The subject line itself can have additional information in it. So and then the body of the email can contain observations of the same sort. And I'll just do the description here. but it's the same kind of information. I'm going to say I'm done with that. I can create that in whatever sophisticated way I want to. I enable the workflow, I save and exit. If I were to create a new high-risk observation, you'd see that both in Slack as well as in my email. And I'm not going to go through that right now because we're almost done with time, but I just wanted to show how easy it is to do that. Last item that I wanted to show was adding the weather to a data event. So using a data event. Now, data events, if you don't know what a data event is, a data event is something that allows things to happen within Fulcrum whenever something happens. So it could be as you create a new record, or it could be as you load a record, or it could be as you shut down a record. And very often it's used for things like validations, right? So we want to make sure we do a little computation that ensures that the you've got the data as it is necessary. You're sure that you're not showing that it's raining and the temperature is less than 0 degrees outside or something like that. You're trying to make sure that you've got validation across all of your data. That's one very common use case. But you can do a lot of things within a data event and it's not limited to doing things inside an app. So one of the other common use cases for data events is to create some kind of integration, either a push or a pull. In this case, I'm going to use a pull. Let's say I'm in that observation and I want to know what the weather's like where they were when that was happening. And in order to do that, I need to capture good weather information. I don't want somebody to write with 2 thumbs that it was kind of sunny and okay outside. Like, I really want real data for where they are. So I'm going to create a new section called weather, local weather. And inside that, I'm going to include 2 fields, one of which is a numeric field. Sorry, I'm going to enter a numeric field here. And for some reason, I'm just struggling today. As I said, this is how you can tell it's live, right? So this is the temperature. And I'm going to say it's in degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to just say temperature for my data label. And I want to have text that shows what the conditions are. I could actually get more from the service I'm going to use right now, but I'm just going to use those 2 conditions. All right. What do I need to do to populate those? Those aren't things that people can populate on their own. I actually want to make them read-only in this case, or I want to make them, I might want to make them hidden so that people can't see what's there. In fact, I'm going to do that instead. So nobody's going to actually be able to manipulate what I'm trying to accomplish here. So what I'll do, I'm going to leave those alone right now so it's easier for us to manage inside the demo app itself. So what I need to do though is I need to create a data event, and you can see here that I've got data events enabled. There's a couple little things that we do in this app that are not that big of a deal, but I want to show you where I can find how to actually pull information from somewhere else and integrate it into the app. And that's docs.fulcrumapp.com, where you've got a lot of developer information. And I'm talking about data events, and when I talk about that, you can see over here there's a whole reference section, which I'm not going to look at right now. There's a huge amount of data there, but there's also some data event examples. And one of the easiest ones to notice is the second one, add current weather. This is the one I'm going to be using. If you flip down further, there's other interesting selection ones that you might need: fetching data from a Socrata device, being able to use the Carto API, using querying Esri REST geo services, that sort of thing. So there's a bunch of stuff we could use, but this add current weather one is right at the top, and it's super easy to implement. So I'm just going to grab all of the JavaScript associated with it and copy it. Then I'm going to go into my app builder, and I'm going to paste it in place. And one thing I'm going to need to add is the API token, which should still be, hopefully, in my section here. Now, no stealing my API token, people. You're on the honor system. Oops. And pasting in place. It's going to plug in the latitude and longitude from the device itself. And you see it's built out here, just basically saying if there's a problem with the request, then say so. Otherwise, set the temperature. I'm going to back that off to just temperature. The condition, I think I said conditions. So I'm going to make sure those are ended correctly, and then I'm going to delete these because I don't need them. You can get them from that API. You could use this to query sensors. You could use this to query a whole bunch of different things. But whatever it is, I'm going to go out and I'm going to get that data, and then I'm going to use that to set my values. So, yep, conditions and temperature. Good. Okay, so if I did all that right, then I should be able to save this app. And then I should be able to go back to my Fulcrum app, which you've previously seen now at least once. And here it is, it's synchronizing. So when I create a new record, a new observation record, I click the plus in the lower right-hand corner, pops up, I've got my new information, and the temperature here is not great in New York. It's 43 degrees out and partly cloudy. So without doing any additional effort on my part as a user, I'm able to put that data into, I'm able to capture that data or integrate that data into my app, so that I've just made things so much easier for people in the field, and the data that I'm getting is much more reliable with respect to getting it from sensors rather than getting it from somebody's say-so. Okay, that is all I have formally for the moment. Hopefully that was useful to you. And what I'd like to do now is stop sharing my screen, and actually, no, not stop sharing my screen, come back to the webinar side of things here, and just say that we'd like to do some wrap up and Q&A. There will be a survey sent out after the webinar, as I said, so please do feel free to provide us with any comments or questions that you have. If you'd like to see more of this kind of content, especially, that's something that my colleagues are really looking to understand. So please feel free to ask any questions now that you need to. Okay, this is from Robert, and he says, do you have any specifics on your Maximo integration? We are working very closely with a client right now on integrating, doing a really solid formal integration with Maximo. That is a work in progress. So no, I don't have specifics on it at the moment, but I'm telling you that, I'm able to tell you that it is a very high priority for us right now. And Robert, if you want to be, to have a discussion with our product team that's focused on this and talk about what your requirements would be, we would love to get that information from you, because that is such a strong requirement. We find a ton of people out there using Maximo and have asset management requirements. So Robert, with your permission, I'd like to connect with you after this and make that happen. I have a question here. I need to upload PDF reports to a directory, Google Drive, SharePoint, Box, etc., where our client can access all finished reports. I know we can email the reports, but are there any other options that can push the report externally? I know that when you do exports, that there's an option to automatically generate the PDFs that are related to whatever the download is that you're doing, and so that may be one way to get it. And I will find out for you, Jim, if this is something that we can do in other ways. I believe with the API you can do it, but I don't know that for sure. I think that it's likely that there's a way to make that happen. I just don't entirely know specifically with respect to PDFs. Are you working with any other CMMS, construction management and maintenance system, something like that, in addition to Maximo? We've worked with, I'd say the biggest priority for us right now is Procore. We're also working with them to get a customer sponsor and to start to perform that integration more effectively. If there are other specific ones that you're interested in, please talk to us about it. We do a ton of work where the integration is not necessarily something that's out of the box, but it is something that is rapid to develop and readily maintainable. We want to create something that will not be a spaghetti mess afterwards. So we do focus on making sure that we've got something that is a maintainable and robust integration, even if it's a one-off. So we've done a ton of work with that, with our customer services, professional services organization. When it comes to pre-built, predefined integrations, we're looking at those primarily right now for Maximo and Procore. And it looks like that's all the questions I have at the moment. I'm wide open to answer any additional questions if anybody's got any out there. I'll stay on the line for another couple of minutes. In the meantime, if you have spent this past hour with me, I hope the time has been valuable. And I know that there are other things you could have been doing, so I thank you very much for choosing to spend that time with us here. If you have additional questions or commentary, please do reach out to us. Go to fulcrumapp.com and submit a form. Reach out to me on LinkedIn or in some other way. Please feel free to reach out to us. We're very interested in making sure that you're highly successful with everything that you do with Fulcrum in your enterprise. And I see people starting to drop off. No additional questions coming in. Thank you very much for your time today, and take care, everyone. This will conclude the webinar.